This is my newest locomotive. I've been getting more into that diesel punk aesthetic, and I just found a picture and there was this curvy looking train. Look at that. It's supposed to be a very streamlined locomotive, and it'll have coaches that look like this as well. They just carry on. This is the full height of the SRC standard. It should be compatible with most other coaches as well that come up to the full height. The front of this is pretty gnarly and took a lot of goofing around to get it right. So what's going on is just loads of wedges all the way to the top. But I've punched out this front section. So that middle section is recessed back a little bit, and then I've put a big spotlight in here, which is inside of a compass, and I'll show you that when I go inside. I've gone a bit overboard with the XML, so on the front we've got the camera because you can't see anything from in here. And then these little dots here are actually the lights, which they look really cool now that I'm looking at it like this. You can kind of see the RGB light back in there, but then this circle is a compass. Then the picture I found has a star on it, so I just thought I'd have a go at putting a star on the front. And this front lip is actually disconnected because I was hitting stuff with it, so I used the pivot subgrid thing where it's just dangling off the front there on some pivots. So this whole front piece through here is a separate subgrid. If it gets hit, then that has its own thing that will break and the rest of the locomotive should be fine. What I've been working on here is the fuel panel. I'm trying to make it go inwards so that when you're looking at it from the outside, it's totally flush. Like, I would really like to get rid of buttons, but I'm not sure how I can do that. Oh, it worked. I think maybe if I turn this one into a wedge, then it might open and close a bit nicer, but I think I'll have to just do something different with the positioning of that pivot, or maybe I will just slide a block across it to XML it a little bit and hide it that way. I'm using my triple wheel truck on this one. For the locomotive part, I'm using the triple, and then on this tender thing, I don't know if this is supposed to be a tender, but I'll make it a tender. I've gone for a real crazy 5-long thing, so this isn't able to pivot at all. This is totally locked in. I just think it's kind of interesting. And then back there, that's all the logic, and that's something I want to cover today. So we're just going to have a quick look at this, and then we'll look at that. Now, there's no door at the moment. Got to no-clip our way into here. And we'll just go for a drive. So the driver can't really see anything out the sides, but there is a window. And then up the front, where I'm not looking, ta-da! It's steam powered. Like everything should be steam powered. So the plan is, I'm going to cut a hole in this side, the left side I think, because that tends to be the side the workbench is on when these things spawn. And we'll have some kind of slidey door that maybe slides in so it keeps that streamline feel. Then there'll be a wall somewhere in here to disconnect this front section, which is like engine room, and then the driver will be at the back, and then maybe I'll be able to put some kind of sleeping compartment or something in here. And I don't know about putting a gangway on this one. See how I feel. But so when you can come up to here, this will let you see your pistons, so just 10 steam pistons again. It's a very compact and simple way to do this. Little walkway comes up to the boiler and the furnace is down here. I don't know if you really need access to this stuff, but it's kind of nice. Below here is just a pipe thing, so the pivot actually comes up into this little housing thing. And then the pipe that runs the impeller for the steam transfer. So steam comes out of this side and goes into that side. There's an impeller down the back there, and the pipe that powers it goes below the furnace. I think I'm stuck in here now, actually. If I just use photo mode and show you what's on the front here. So the water return is on this side, and there's a tank to top that up with any extra water. The piping isn't very long in this, so it comes out and then almost directly into the side, into the pistons. And then going across is also basically nothing, it's going up and over. That's the impeller that's driving all the transfer. Steam goes into this side, and then it comes out in the wall, and it goes back into that tank. So it's a very short run. It probably doesn't need the water that's in that tank. And I've got diesel furnace, fuel valve, and I've just put a big fuel tank in there. And so this is going to be where the hose anchor and electrical anchor are located. There'll be 2 pumps back in here. They will connect into the fuel tank, and then the fuel tank will connect into the furnace. This big grey blob is a compass. This little, you can kind of see it, this little shape here, little indent thing. That's where the spotlight is. It's the bigger 3x3 spotlight, but then the compass has been XML'd up to 3x3 and stretched, and it comes all the way back into here, and that's how it covers the spotlight so perfectly. So far, it's worked out pretty well. The first time I tested it, when I came out along this line, this is going from $30 train yard. That's FJ Warner over there, so we're heading east. When I came up to around this section, the front of it started to get hit on things because it goes up a hill here. I think the front is at the lowest point that the SRC standard allows for, but I usually don't drive out this way, so I've never really noticed how bad the track is over here. See this? It goes up on this very steep and janky hill. I think it might have been there where I impacted before actually. Just back there it seemed like the slope was a bit too steep. As long as we keep within some kind of speed restriction, it's probably not going to take any damage. Right then, so what is all this SRC, TCP, ABC, what's it all mean? SRC is the Stormworks Rail Committee. It's basically a group that wanted to create a standard for how to build locomotives and trains and wagons and rail cars in Stormworks, so that they would all be compatible between each other, right? So I could have a train, you could have a train, and we could just, this could be my train, that could be your train, and they would connect with the same connector height, all the same couplers, everything would be the same, and then all the logic would be the same as well. So when you apply the brakes on one person's train, it would apply the brakes on the other person's train. So anything that's connected within a train, any rail cars or locomotives connected within a train, would all have the same logic, all send and receive the same signals, and work together. That's what all this logic is. TCP is the Train Communication Protocol. So that's all the logic, all the data. You can see all these ones have a lot of debug output, and it's broken down mostly into modules and interfaces. The way I understand it is that if you think of it like this, right, a module has a lot of composite connectors on it, and that's what's transferring the data between other modules or the main system. So you have like a main controller which handles pretty much everything. But then this is outputting a lot of data into these hubs, and the hubs are picking up data from all these other modules. So it's like those power bricks where you can just keep plugging in more electrical outlets into each other. So you just keep having all these hubs that are all connected, and it shares the signal within the whole system. So that's like a module, right? And then an interface is usually just connected to a module, but it's the one that has the data outputs. So the Boolean read outputs or Boolean logic nodes and the number logic nodes. If we take this, for example, this set here, this is what every TCP SRC TCP train will have. This is a drivetrain, so this controls the brakes, the throttles, the slip, and there's a remote activation, which I'm not sure if that works right now. It picks up the wheel RPS and it picks up the current speed. So this is applying like ABS systems for the wheels to make sure you don't slip. And then what we've got is just these two connections to connect the interface or the interface into the module. And then the module takes all these connections over to this main input, and this is where it's connecting into the main system controller. So I've kind of sectioned it up a little bit here. A drivetrain module here connected to a drivetrain interface. You need an interface and a module. As far as I can tell, in every situation you need an interface and a module. So that's, one thing. And then over here, I've got the passenger doors, the passenger module, and then the passenger lighting. I've not actually used any of this one yet, but that's like another one set of things. Over here, this is the decouple interface and the decouple module, so they work together. And then this controller next to it is my own controller, because TCP doesn't have a manual decouple interface for how to do it, because like everyone will have their own preference for how you want to manually decouple things. My preference is a key. So what I do is I take a key input and I send it into my manual override, and then my outputs are going into the connector. And then I'm also taking the TCP output and sending it into my controller. So these two controllers here, that's TCP controlling the decoupling of different rail cars within the train. And then this controller is if someone's walking around the outside of the train and wants to manually override those signals. It's basically just a complicated OR gate. Yeah, it's just an OR gate, right? So we can have either my manual decouple key or the TCP decouple signal will decouple the front coupler, and then just another one of that for the rear coupler. If you wanted to do a system like this where you could have any kind of crazy system to manually decouple, right? You could have a thing that detects what time it is and decouples at midnight or something. And so you could just take the TCP decouple, send it into an OR, and then have whatever other logic you want on here. So that's why TCP doesn't have that built in. With this thing here, we've got exterior lighting and the exterior lighting interface. This lets you change some of the colors of the lights. And then this big one here is a light box extender. It's a little bit different because it's an extender, not an interface or a module. But what this does is it's got all the light outputs. So you don't need to use all of these. And it's only really receiving this one input from the interface to tell it which lights to turn off and on. And then we can have all these different systems connected, all these different light groups connected. In my template, I have it set up so that I have a light to represent each flip switch within the controller. And then I just remove the ones I don't need. I've started making my own controllers. So mine I've labeled TRS, TCP. Basically, I needed a way to override the brakes because there's an automatic parking brake in TCP, which I don't like. There's this thing, auto parking brake. No thanks. That basically means whenever your thing spawns, it applies the brakes, and it'll have the brakes on until a master locomotive is connected to the train. But being Stormworks, I want to spawn things and then push them around because it's convenient. So I turn that brake off, and then I'm using this push button here, and I'm sending it into my own controller, and then my controller is intercepting the TCP brakes. So if the locomotive applies the brakes, the brake signal still gets sent out. So you would connect this, for instance, to each wheel's brake signal. And then on the other end, I'm bringing it in here, and then I connect these things into a loop, into a chain. So you can come and push these buttons to override it, or it'll take the signal from TCP to turn those brakes on. So once you've got a template like this set up, it's really easy to just make a new train. You just grab all of this and connect the things that aren't connected. The way I've been doing my templates is I have the couplers and one of all the lights and connectors and stuff, buttons that I want to use. So you can see here, this is going to be my typical control input. We've got a throttle and a brake lever, one instrument panel to control if this locomotive is the master, so if this is where the control is coming from, and then another one for remote engine activation and the reverse button. And you have to make your own controller to interpret that. So this thing here is taking in the brake signal and the throttle signal from the levers, and also the reverse button from the reverse panel, and then it's spitting a bunch of this out to the drivetrain UI. And the drivetrain UI is just a UI node, this one here, user interface node, or user input. It's just sending it into this UI node on the drivetrain. And then that is telling these two nodes brake and throttle, and I don't think reverse is on here, but reverse is essentially just negative forwards throttle, right? Because we're using electric motors, TCP is optimized for electric motors. So they'll spin forwards when you give it a 1 signal and backwards when you give it a -1 signal, which is good because it lets me build a steam engine just to generate electricity, and then any other locomotive that is supporting TCP can just connect to that and it will just go. And yeah, and then all you're really doing from that point, once you've got your logic set up, the composite data just goes into that bottom electrical connector. It goes out one way and in the other way. Connects up in the middle at this point here in the main controller. We've got a rear coupler and a front coupler. We've got 4 connections, so we can take an in and an out signal from the front and the back. All I've done, right, in the last couple of minutes is I've connected the brake signal from the drivetrain into my TCP brake override controller because of how I want to personally control this locomotive. Connected up the slip, throttle, brakes, wheel RPS, current speed, connect up all that stuff, and then I could start using this. I need to connect my current speed, but I don't know if I've got a... Oh yeah, I've got RPS out here. I'm only measuring it on one set of wheels, and it would be good for me to create another drivetrain controller to control that rear set of wheels. So what I can do, I can just copy this. And then I just need to connect the nodes for that rear set.
A few moments later.
You know when people say, I've connected everything. How long have I been connecting things I thought were connected? Request master, reverse, start engine. I hope my explanation of what SRC, Stormworks Rail Committee, and TCP, Train Communication Protocol, I hope the explanation has been good. If there's anything that doesn't make sense, leave comments and I'll answer them, or I'll try to. I'm only a tester and I'm not really doing that much testing on TCP, so I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't really know what I'm doing. I think that's actually good for testing though, because it's like giving something complicated to someone who really isn't that knowledgeable of anything about how it should work. So I'm going to run into issues a lot quicker than people who do know how it works. And what do you think of this locomotive or this style? It's a bit, I think the blue is a bit too bright, but like the shape, is it good? I don't know. I think it's coming out okay, and this is only sort of the first pass across it, so for a couple of hours work, that's quite good. Thanks for watching. See you later.